Good morning, everyone. Cheryl Connor here, reaching out from the Blue Ridge Mountains. Today's topic, in 4 minutes or less, let's see if we can do it, is grief. I don't know if you could say anything really about grief in 4 minutes, but I will say I'm dedicating this to my mom, Nancy Connor, who died a year and a half ago and whose birthday is this coming Saturday. And she was the first one who had me thinking about grief because long before it was sexy, she was doing hospice work and being influenced by the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on grief. What was important about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was at that point, there was absolutely no recognition of grief in the medical system or in most social systems, except everybody had funerals. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said, grief is more complicated than any of that. She was important because she named some, what she thought were stages of grief, that there was denial and anger and bargaining with God, like, no, you can't make this happen to me, or depression or acceptance. Now, it turns out we've come a long way since Elizabeth Kubler-Ross named those stages. And before she died, she wrote some articles and she talked about how grateful she was that people had responded to her work so well, but that grief was much more individual than those phases. That sometimes people only do one of those phases. Sometimes people don't do any of those phases. It's such an individual thing. But her work was still monumental in really helping people see that grief is a human phenomena worthy of respect, worthy of attention, worthy of giving yourself the time to have grief and to give it the space to pass through your systems. In the holistic world of health, which I have been a part of for some 20 plus years, when you don't process grief, it's said that you keep it in your lungs. So I've had asthma on and off during my life, which doesn't mean I necessarily have been a bad girl processing grief, but that my soul, my psyche has had challenges of dealing with the losses in my life, the losses with other people's lives, and I would say now in our culture. So even though we have these amazing processes in major religions, for example, to have funerals or calling hours or shivas, to sit shivas, I think one of the growing edges is for our country, our people, is that we need ceremonies or times to acknowledge other kinds of grief besides the grief of a person. And it may be logical. Maybe it's not a big earth-shattering reflection. But right now, many of us are grieving the loss of life as we knew it. Grieving the loss of life as we knew it. And we don't have a big ceremony where we all come and cry and celebrate the life that we had, which is no longer with us. But we each in our own way can reflect on the joys that we've had, the joys that are complicated right now, like seeing a family celebrating a death or mourning and celebrating the life of someone because of their death. So my mom dying in April of 2020, we had a Zoom conversation about my mother and not a funeral or a burial. And that's a bit like what's happening for all of us right now. We have to grieve each in our own way all that we have lost during this time. Now, the fact is, as I will say often, happiness is an inside job. We have to honor this grief. And in doing so, we should look at what it was about that life or that person that made us feel more fully ourselves. And ultimately, we have to find ways back to experiencing our fullest self even after the loss of the people or the style of living or the social circumstances. So I know for me, I've mourned, needed to mourn more the loss of a lot of personal contact, the loss of a lot of group settings that were meaningful and joyful to me. And we can all pray and hope that these situations will open up again. But give yourself the excuse, the time to say, what have I lost during this time period of the lockdown? What part of my joy is harder to achieve now because of it? And how can I re-stabilize myself, living my most fullest life in the face of these circumstances? There's a lot to grieve, and there's a lot to be grateful for. And then there is the call to us to come back to the fullest expression of our lives, even in the face of loss. I hope you can find some time this week to reflect on what you have lost and maybe also about what you've gained, although that's the topic of another video. So have a wonderful week. Mourn and grieve what needs to be mourned and grieved, whether it's a mother or playing tennis. Good luck to you all. Bye-bye. Thanks for checking in.